The college football playoff field is set, and you got some people that are happy, some people that are not happy. You've got some teams with a very nice path to the college football, to the national championship, and you got other teams with a very tough path. And when I look at this bracket, that's my first takeaway, is just the different paths for different teams. And I'm going to give you two simple things that they could change that, in my opinion, would make the rankings, the playoff field better. That would make the bracket better moving forward. And they're both very, very simple. It doesn't take a lot to do these two things. So before we get into those two things, and then after I show you the two things that I think they should do, I will show you what the bracket would have looked like if they did do these two things. All right, so again, you look at this bracket, I don't like that Oregon is going to have to play Ohio State or Tennessee in the quarterfinals. Oregon, the best team in the country, the number one overall seed. That is a tough draw. I don't like that Georgia potentially could have to play Notre Dame, who might be the best team coming out of that first round. So Georgia rewarded for being the SEC champs? Not really. I'd rather have Texas's path. Texas gets to play Clemson at home, then Arizona State. That's a much easier path to the semifinals. Yeah, it's one more game, but still, you look at Arizona State and Boise State. These teams are not ranked in the top, even the top 5, 6, whatever, and they're going to get a first round bye and potentially play Penn State or Texas in the next round. So, that's going to be a tough first matchup for them, but they get the bye. And so I don't like the way the bracket sets up. I like the 12 teams. I have no issues with the 12 teams. I think they got that right, but I have an issue with how they're seeded, and I could see this continuing to be a problem moving forward. So I'm going to address these two things. Some of the complaints I heard. Let's just jump into it. So I'm going to go to these. All right, my first thing that I would change. First round bye should go to teams that play in a conference championship game. I don't think they should have to win that conference championship game. I think they should have to play in a conference championship game. And so here is the issue here. And I've got a bigger picture thing that the way I would actually do this, but I didn't really want to put this in the video because it does not affect just the playoff. I would have every team play on conference championship weekend. I would actually have every team play. So you'd have 1 and 2 in the conference play for the conference championship. Then I'd have 3 and 4 play. 5 and 6 would play. So every team would play the same amount of games. And then you would have great games. You would have great games and resume building games for teams that are on the bubble. And if you did that, then I probably would take the top 4 conference champions. But that's a totally different topic. Maybe we'll revisit this down the road. But just in terms of the playoff and making some tweaks to the current playoff model, I would make it to where if you play in a conference championship and you're one of the top 4 teams, you get a first round bye. So that would mean that Penn State and Texas would get a first round bye instead of Arizona State and Boise State. I think everyone would agree that Texas and Penn State are better football teams than Arizona State and Boise State. I would not have the top 4 teams because I think you would then have the risk of getting a team that did not play in a conference championship game. You would risk having them get a first round bye. So let's just say that Ohio State was ranked number 4. Let's say Texas won the SEC and Ohio State went up at 4. We had like Oregon 1, Texas 2, Penn State 3, Ohio State 4. Then I would not give Ohio State the first round bye in that scenario because they didn't play in a conference championship. So I think you should have to play that extra game in order to have a chance to get a bye. But again, I think Penn State and Texas, everyone would agree that those teams are better than Arizona State and Boise State, and I think that they would deserve a bye. And it just makes the playoff bracket much more balanced, and I'm going to show you that here in just a second. So that's the first thing that I would do. I know that some people want to reseed the teams. I don't want to reseed the teams because the thing about that is you've got all the travel. So you got fans traveling to the games. They don't know where they're going to go until you'd have to wait until the results of the first round. You've also got just plans. People make plans, and you have to schedule around these. I mean, college football fans are diehard fans, and we're right around the holidays, New Year's, all that. Maybe you've got plans and you have to work around your favorite team's game. So I think that the schedule should be set. I don't think you should be reseeding teams. I just think that's a logistical issue. So I don't like that idea. And I've heard that thrown out there. But I would just have, again, the top 2 teams that play in a conference championship game, or the top 4 teams, I should say, would get those first round buys. And so this year that would be Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Penn State. And I'll show you that bracket in just a second. The other thing that I would do, the other thing that I would change, teams not playing in a conference championship game, they would not be able to move ahead of a team that does play in a conference championship game. And so that would have ended the Alabama SMU debate right there. But it also would have kept SMU from falling behind Indiana. That one really, you say you're not going to penalize teams for playing in a conference championship, but SMU did drop behind Indiana. And so I would not have done that. And the reason why is because, and I've said this many times, if you play in an extra game in a conference championship game and you lose, why should you fall behind a team that didn't play at all, a team that sat at home? I just do not like that at all. I don't think that should happen at all. I don't care if Clemson had beaten SMU by 30 points. I mean, it just would be what it would be. I mean, I'm against that. So if you had an issue with SMU, I think you should have ranked them lower to begin with. I heard like, I think it was Joey Galloway was comparing SMU and Alabama, and he said they kept saying that SMU played it. He kept saying they lost. They didn't play. They lost. Well, what if Alabama had played in a conference championship game? They might have lost. We don't have any way of knowing that. So I am totally against teams that do not play in conference championship games being able to pass teams that did play in conference championship games to close out the season. Now, I think there can be movement with teams that did play in conference championship games. So let's say, for example, Arizona State was ranked a little bit higher and they looked really, really good. Let's say they only had one regular season loss and we thought that they were maybe a top 5 team and they jump ahead of Penn State or Texas. Like, that would be okay if that scenario were to play out. Again, this year that was not the case, but we could see something like that happening. Or maybe, let's say Penn State had lost to Oregon the way that they did, but Georgia beat Texas by 21. I'd be okay with Texas and Penn State switching positions if Penn State looked better in their conference championship game. I'm only talking about the teams that do not play in conference championship games. Those teams, in my opinion, should not be able to pass teams that did play in conference championship games. It's that simple. I think these conference championship games should matter, and I don't think teams should go into these games, wishing that, like with SMU, and that was something that was talked about, they could have just opted out of the ACC championship and they'd been in the playoff. We want these conference championship games to matter, but we also don't want to penalize teams for making it to the conference championship. So that's just, those are 2 things that I would do with the current playoff model, just to make things better, in my opinion. And let me just show you what the bracket would look like if you followed these 2 simple changes. So we would have Oregon 1, Georgia 2, just like they are. Texas would be 3, and Penn State would be 4. Again, this is based off of the committee's rankings, the way they rank the teams in real life. So you would have Texas and Penn State getting buys. I know they didn't win their conference championship, but they played that extra game. They played in a conference championship game, and I believe if the committee believes they are top 4 teams and they played the conference championship, then I believe they should get that bye. I know there's going to be plenty of debate on this, but this is, again, just my opinion. And so how would the rest of the teams look? So then you would have Notre Dame would be 5, Ohio State would be 6, Tennessee 7. SMU would be ahead of Indiana. They would not have dropped below Indiana in this if you followed these steps. So SMU would host Indiana. And then you would have Boise State at 10, Arizona State at 11, Clemson at 12. And just look at how much better this playoff bracket works out. Now you've got Oregon in their first round matchup, or in their first game in the quarterfinals, playing the winner of SMU Indiana instead of them having to play the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. You are truly rewarding the number 1 team if you do this. And then you look at Georgia. They would play Tennessee or Boise State. They wouldn't have to deal with Notre Dame or Ohio State. And of course, they're going to have to play Notre Dame possibly. if Notre Dame beats Indiana in the playoff. And again, Ohio State may have to play, Oregon may have to play Ohio State. So to me, this is a much more balanced bracket. I think that you get the top teams, they get the byes, and it works out a lot better. Maybe the first round matchups I think would still be very good, but it's really more about the quarterfinal games. Just look at the quarterfinal matchups that we would get in this scenario. Potentially Oregon SMU or Oregon Indiana, Penn State Notre Dame. That is a very solid quarterfinal matchup. We'd have Texas and Ohio State potentially. That is a big-time quarterfinal matchup. And then Georgia in a rematch potentially against Tennessee. These matchups would be better, especially in the quarterfinals, and we are rewarding the 1 and 2 seed in this scenario. So this is how I would do it to make those two simple changes. Again, I know there's going to be plenty of debate. I'd love to get your thoughts on these two changes, and maybe there's something I haven't thought of. What ideas do you have to make the process better for getting the 12 teams in the playoff and where we seed them? I'd love to know all of your thoughts, your ideas, and maybe you thought of something that I haven't, but these are the two things that I would do. So again, let me know down in the comments below.